as the world's governments are taking action to cut fossil fuel use in the future, governments last year gave a record $1 trillion in taxpayer subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, the main driver of climate change. Combined government subsidies for oil, natural gas, electricity, and coal hit an all-time high in 2022, even as soaring energy prices contributed to crippling inflation.
And even as the fossil fuel companies enjoyed record profits last year.
Finally, some good news for things that breathe. The Biden EPA has reinstated Obama-era regulations limiting toxic mercury pollution from coal-fired power plants that had been stripped away by the Trump administration. Mercury pollution from power plants is a potent neurotoxin that damages brain development in babies and children and causes heart disease in adults.
Well, there you go. After 14 years, one positive story. I'll take it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a recent poll conducted by Link Research Partners basically says what we've been talking about for nearly 2 decades here on the program. Working class voters care about what? They care about jobs and the economy. They care about inflation right now. They care about that kitchen table stuff. You know, how they're going to keep a roof over their head, food on the table for the kids. The James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. That's the wheelhouse. And this is where Democrats, I think, need to focus their message much better and jump in the middle of places where maybe they haven't been for a while. Again, far down the list, the culture war outrage candy that, the stuff they give us a daily overdose of. We're here to share some thoughts on maybe how we message this better and how we reunite the country. I've asked my good friend Mike Lux to come talk with us. Mike's the president of American Family Voices. They've got a new piece out on a new strategy out for factory towns and how we reunite America. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rick. It's always great to be on your show.
So let's talk about the results of this poll that just out. Accurate assessment, working class issues, our jobs, the economy, how we're going to put food on the table, that kind of stuff. Not so much about that really divisive culture war stuff.
Yeah. Of course I'm biased. I paid for the poll. My organization did. But I think it is accurate because, look, when we've been in these counties, and Rick, you've been with me in these counties. You've gone there, and walked the walk. Most of the folks in these counties are under such stress in their lives because the economy sucks, because of the opioid crisis that's ravaging the communities. All of these things are going on. They don't have time to worry about all the BS. They don't have time to worry about what Tucker Carlson or some crazy person says, because they're focused on just making a living wage and getting through to their retirement with it and having some kind of savings, making sure their kids have a decent life. And it's hard going. In the original poll that we did, over half of the people were telling us that either they or someone in their family in the last few years had lost their job, lost their health care, lost their pension, had trouble with addiction issues, had trouble with mental health issues, had been hurt on the job, and had to take time off because of that. I mean, people are living tough lives in these outside of big cities and outside of the big city suburbs. And I think Democrats if they're going to win, they need to speak to those issues that really matter to people. And I think most of the rest of it is just fraud.
Yeah.
But if we start speaking to those economic issues, I think Democrats will do a lot better. And I think the whole progressive world needs to refocus in on these counties and these people.
No, in fact, I just had a conversation with a friend not too long ago, talking about the red state, blue state stuff, and the rural urban divide that's being thrown on us.
Yeah.
And I said, look, Democrats have a lot of responsibility in this. Because, I remember the Clinton era of we're going to get rid of those factory jobs. Everyone's going to get an office job. We're all going to wear white shirts and ties. And that's not the reality for most working people. And then for people who lost their jobs and couldn't get an education or whatever that reason is, we just told them, well, they were lazy and didn't want to work. And this is one of those moments. And I came across this as we went and did our tour. The messaging that Democrats have had is, just bad over the last several years. The Carville, it's the economy, stupid. That should be the battle cry, making sure that we have an economy that accommodates all working people.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And by the way, I worked for Bill Clinton. I like the guy, and he did some good things, but the trade deals that he did were terrible. A lot of the policies he pursued, and the whole rhetoric, like, the only way to have a good life is to go to college. The only way to get ahead is be willing to change jobs 8 times in your career. And that's just not the reality for most folks. Most folks in America, frankly.
Right. Now, I've been saying, Mike, over the last several months that I think Joe Biden's doing a great job. I think the president is doing an excellent job. I think he's pushing back on a lot of those neoliberal tendencies that even he voted for. So you got to be upfront about the fact that he was part of that. He was, the consensus at the time was, we're going to create these great new jobs, and everyone's going to have a corner office and wear a tie, and it's going to be a great, amazing future. And that trade was the way we were going to stop wars. There was a whole idea around this. And I go back to, and the reason that I can give Clinton and Biden, some pass back then is they really believed they were going to make people's lives better, that by educating and doing those things, they were going to lift people up. I know the Republicans just saw, hey, there's cheap labor overseas, a way for corporations to make a big buck. Let's go. So, this is where I see this. So I'm looking at the president moving towards reshoring manufacturing, investing in the future technologies and having Buy American provisions. And I'm going, this is a transformational moment. This is an opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about. So I guess the question I have for you is, looking at your poll and looking at the study you guys have done, is the president taking your playbook and moving it far enough, fast enough? I see him moving it, but is it fast enough?
Well, time will tell whether it's fast enough, but I do think he is taking the playbook. I said in the report that we published today that I think this is a generational opportunity for Democrats. We just spent the last 2 years passing all kinds of great legislation that's going to help working people. And then when you look at the executive orders and the regulatory things that have happened, you look at the National Labor Relations Board and the things that they are doing, really pushing back hard on the union busting. And you look at this thing about no junk fees. You look at just the array of things, the Buy America provisions in some of these bills. It really is making a difference. It can make a difference. And as Joe Biden was doing his State of the Union, about 15 minutes in, my wife, Barbara, turned to me and said, did you write this speech for him?
I got the same thing.
I kind of felt like I had, he's really focused on this stuff. He gets it. And people kid about him being Scranton Joe. Scranton's one of those hard-hit towns that was hammered by deindustrialization and all those bad trade policies.
Oh boy, was it! I grew up in Cleveland. Another place hammered by it.
Yeah. He's going back to his roots, and you're right. He and a lot of other people, made some mistakes back in the day. But I think Joe Biden gets it on a different kind of level. That he's seen what's happened, and he understands that some of those neoliberal policies, many of those neoliberal policies, were mistakes, and he's trying to fix it.
And that's music to my ears, something I've been calling for a long time. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Mike Lux, president of the American Family Voices Group, AmericanFamilyVoices.org, the website. If you want to check out their most recent report, A Strategy for Factory Towns, we'll get links out, and you can find it there at the website. Mike, here's the thing. I'm looking at where we are. I see what Joe Biden's doing, and I think it's moving us in a really good direction. But I'm looking at Marjorie Three Names over there in Georgia, Congressman Green saying we need a national divorce, Mike, because we're going to pit the red against the blue, the rural versus the urban, and it's all about tearing us apart. I've been saying what you've got in this report for a while has been the way we reunite, we revive, reunionize this country to move us forward. What are your thoughts when you see someone like Green throwing this? We need a national divorce, Mike. We need to break the country up, slice us up even more than we already are. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting to hear this kind of talk, and it's whenever there's a Democrat in the White House, you start hearing people on the right, on the far right, like her, talking about secession, talking about a national divorce, because they don't like the idea of moving forward. They basically want to repeal the entire 20th century.
I've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah, right. They want to repeal the New Deal. They want to repeal the Great Society. They want to take away the Warren Court and the desegregation, and all of those things are anathema to the people on the right. And so when they see that someone like Biden is moving us, in the right direction, it scares them. And they also, because they know it's popular, they see the same polling that we did in our poll, that we saw. I mean, these policies that Biden is pursuing are really popular for good reason.
Yeah.
They're providing real jobs. They're raising wages. They're making sure people have better health care. They're making sure people have better pensions. I mean, one of Biden's executive orders restored 3 million pensions to people. So this is popular stuff, and that scares the hell out of these right wingers. They don't want to live in a country like that.
No, and here's the thing, and because we traveled into rural areas, and we talked to people all across Iowa. I'll use Iowa as we went to 8 states. Iowa was one of the examples that really stuck out to me, because as we met Mike Franken, who was running for Senate, and J.D. Scholten, who won his state House seat, the both of them, and virtually everybody said, Iowa used to be a strong, moderate Democratic state. It was a hardworking, working class state with working class values. And over the last several years, it's turned into a radical, extreme state where you look at their state house now and the kind of insanity that they're moving through there. Nobody wants ending child labor laws in certain places, giving immunity shields to corporations, destroying education. We can go down the list. But the question is when you go back into those communities, you see that their identities have been stolen. They used to be the place that made stuff. This is an opportunity, and I think Democrats have done a crummy job of messaging. This is an opportunity to reach into those places and say, we're bringing help. We're bringing an identity back. I look at East Palestine. There was an opportunity for Democrats to go in there early on, and we're here. Even if the governor wasn't going to ask you to come in, stand at the border and say, we're here at the ready. It's bad messaging in my view. Policies are great. I hear people say we love those progressive policies. We love the manufacturing. We love the healthcare. We love the education. It's just, the messaging is way off. So I guess how do we fix that?
Well, I think fixing Democratic messaging is is a hard task. You feel like the guy in Greek mythology trying to push the rock up the hill. I do think that Biden Biden gets it to some extent. He understands in his gut, and hopefully that can translate into the campaign. But I mean, Rick, a lot of Democrats these days are from the two coasts. They're from big cities. They don't really understand the problems of folks in small and medium sized towns, and it's a disconnect. And we have to like shake up that culture and get people thinking about these small and mid-sized towns again.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while Democrats need to adopt a striking worker. Maybe we need to amend that and adopt a rural worker who lost their job and walk in their shoes for a day, because you go into these communities and look, these are good people. The problem is they've been fed a lot of nonsense. But when it comes down to it, their concerns are the same as anyone else's. We want good jobs, safe neighborhoods, good schools for our kids, opportunities for the future. And for me, that's what we should be talking about. That's the wheelhouse, not the divisive stuff. Be right on the issue, but you don't lead with that. You lead with, I'm going to make your life better, and this is how we're going to move policy to do that. And I think that's what your report here is talking about, and hoping to help move in that direction. So, what are you hoping comes out of this report and this poll? What do you think? What do you think is where's it going to go?
Well, what I hope is a renewed focus on economic issues, a renewed focus on working class politics. That we get, and I think they are moving in the right direction, but that we get the Biden White House fully engaged on this stuff. That we get the Biden campaign. I'm hoping that the messaging recommendations that folks like Sherrod Brown and Tammy Baldwin and Bob Casey, in a lot of these states can use those messaging recommendations. I heard from a congressman from a small town outside of Pittsburgh today after we did the report, and was like, this is great, this is perfect. So we can get more members of Congress focused on this kind of message and on these issues. I mean, you look at the most popular issues in our poll, and they're all these issues that Rick, that you talk about all the time on your show. It's like, let's stop wage theft, right? Let's stop union busting. Let's end the stealing people's retirement. It's that kind of thing that I think we need to focus on.
Now let's stick up for the working person. And I'm going to guess it was Chris DeLuzio from out in Western Pennsylvania.
It was, actually.
The guy who took my advice and took a striking worker to the State of the Union. That's the kind of people we need in Congress.
Absolutely.
And we do. We need to get back into these communities and talking to people. And I'm looking forward to the next Working Class Heroes Tour that'll take us back through all those places we went back during the election last year to talk about this message and preach the good word. But, Mike, I appreciate the time as always. Excellent report. I hope folks will take a look at it. A strategy for factory towns. The good folks over at American Family Voices, and put it on AmericanFamilyVoices.org, the website. Mike, thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, Rick. Great.
Appreciate the time. Again, make sure you check out the website, AmericanFamilyVoices.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I was just thinking about, when we did our Working Class Heroes radio tour that took us, from Pennsylvania through Ohio, into Michigan, through Indiana, into Michigan, into Wisconsin, Iowa. We were all over the place for that month and a, it was like a little over 5 weeks we were on the road. And we went into some incredible places and met really great people, held events, and the common theme kept coming back to, we used to have this identity. This factory was, who this town's heart and soul was, and that factory may have only, employed 500 or 1,000 people, but that town of 8, 9, 10,000 people, that factory was the economic engine for that community. And what we know is manufacturing jobs have a massive reverberation effect, especially when those factories are unionized. And we went to a lot of those. I was really surprised at, Iowa is a no rights at work state, has been for a very long time. But just how strong the labor movement was and is there, of workers saying, no, we demand to have a voice on the job. We demand a contract that pays good wages. We demand a job that provides health insurance and retirement security. And when that was stripped away from them, not because the unions were there, because that's always the message. The unions made those companies move to China or move to Mexico. No, it was terrible trade deals. It was corporate greed. It was CEOs going, what? We can get slave labor in China? What? We can use Mexican labor that's a tenth of what we have to, really? And then we could bring that stuff back and not have to pay massive tariffs on it? Oh, sign us up. That means huge bonuses? Absolutely. Screw those communities. Screw those working people. And when you started talking to people in those communities who this happened to, who their identity was, you go into Toledo, Ohio, they were the glass capital of the world. You go into Appleton, Wisconsin, it was the paper capital of the world. You go into, Iowa, the meat packing plants. You go into, in cities across this country, their identity was this industry, and it was stripped from them. It's not like they lost it. It was taken from them. And that identity, that economy that still has not recovered. And then to have a messaging machine says, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Or the Republican in Ohio who, when asked, the representative who asked, what are you going to do for our town? He told the person, move. Well, they love their communities. They love their home. They love their families. They love their friends and neighbors. They're committed to this. And to have a representative say, just move. Instead of saying, hey, how do we rebuild? How do we attract another anchor? How do we attract more industry? How do we invest in the future? And I think Biden's doing that. And this is where Democrats have got to figure out how to stop talking in paragraphs and get back into bumper stickers. I've been saying for a while, every project that gets out of the infrastructure bill should come with a 20-foot cardboard cutout of Biden, that stupid sticker that they were putting on gas pump of Biden going, yeah, I did that. Start taking credit for stuff. Start promoting the fact that we're making lives better. They don't do it. They just don't. And when you look at the polling is there. It's what the American working class wants. It's what they're starving for, a party that's going to fight for them and fight for their families. And yet what's happened is, Democrats they're on the right side of the issue, but they're pushed into this Now we've got to be, well, homogenous and pure on every issue. And I say, look, I'm in favor of people living their best lives. I'm in favor of people being able to do what they want. That should be a life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing. But we should, bread and butter, jobs. Bread and butter, healthcare for families, education. That should be the bread and butter. When they bring up, oh, well, you're for this. No, I'm for making people's lives better. I'm for moving us forward as opposed to tearing us down and wanting to rip us apart and move us backward. This is where Democrats better figure out their messaging. Or we need a party that will. Maybe a labor party. I've had people tell me, Rick, we need a labor party. At the end of it, it's going to come down to us voting. And when working people vote on the issues that are important to working people, we get good policy, which is why Republicans don't want you voting. I'll take a quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts, walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and short-changing sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut. arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the oral arguments of the Shelby versus Holder Supreme Court case. You remember that? You remember how we just, that voting rights stuff, not so important. Let the states decide how we're going to go back to blocking, certain groups of people from voting and putting massive obstacles in the way because, hey, why not? But this is an important anniversary. It's coming up, I guess, next week. And to talk about this, I've asked Kathy Fang to come share some thoughts. She's the National Redistricting Director over at Common Cause, commoncause.org, the website. They're out talking about why this is so important. Kathy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick, for having me.
So why is this a big deal? For most people aren't hung up in the legal cases and all this. Why is this a big one?
I mean, the short answer is that when the Supreme Court essentially obliterated one of the major tools of the Voting Rights Act to protect people's voting rights, it opened the door for a slew of restrictive voting laws that states pounced on in order to stop people from voting. And everything that we think of as creating more access for people who are ready to vote and eligible to vote, like early voting, like same-day registration, voter identification, it opened up the states to be able to pull all of that back. And not only that, they also passed laws that allowed for much easier purging of lists of voters, oftentimes capturing people who might have similar names, like Rick Smith, right? Yeah. Some Rick Smith out there might have done something, and you find out when you show up to the polling place that your name's been removed from a list of eligible voters, and now you've got to jump through multiple hurdles to be able to cast a ballot. So in 2013, 10 years ago, the Supreme Court was making this decision about whether to pull back on the Voting Rights Act, and what they ultimately did was not just harm the rights of those people that they were considering in Shelby County, but they opened up the door for the House of Democracy essentially to be burned down.
No, and this is another one of those moments where you ask the question, how was it before our Supreme Court decided that they were going to, because again, John Roberts during his confirmation said he was going to call balls and strikes. He believed in decided law. You guys got a funny word, stare decisis or something along this thing that says, hey, I believe in the law of yesterday. I'm not going to just completely overturn things. And yet this is another example of the Roberts Court, just going, screw the past. Yeah. We're making new law.
Activist court deciding on its own to reinterpret laws that had been adopted. The Voting Rights Act was adopted in 1965, right? And every 10 to 15 years or so, they were required to renew it. So Congress had to go through a process of looking at it, deciding if we had solved the problem of racism or not, found sufficient evidence for bipartisan, near unanimous votes of Democrats and Republicans to adopt and re-adopt the Voting Rights Act again and again, always, in fact, under Republican administrations, signed into law by Republican presidents. And yet the Roberts Court in 2013 reviewed a case coming out of Shelby County, Alabama, and decided that they were going to strip the Voting Rights Act of one of its most important tools. And so let me just explain that for a second. The Voting Rights Act has essentially two sides to it. One that provides preventative protection. Let's think of that like a smoke detector, right? That's sections 4 and 5. And then another that provides reactive correction, section 2. That's more like a fire extinguisher, right? And what the Supreme Court decided in 2013 was we're going to get rid of the fire alarm. As Justice Ginsburg said at the time, it's like saying, it's not raining right now, and so I don't need this umbrella. I get rid of it, right? Or I think the more apt analogy is I'm standing under an umbrella. I'm dry. Why do I need this? I'm just going to throw this thing away, right? And the reality is that what the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 and 5, that was gotten rid of in Shelby County in that case, what it was doing was before a bad law was enacted and put into place, you could go to the court and ask them to review it, and the court would say if there was a discriminatory impact that could be identified, they would stop that bad law from going into place. So voter identification, strict voter identification laws, voter purging, elimination of all of these accessible voting laws that states had. If states were going after that, the court could stop them and say you can't go that far. And by removing that fire alarm protection, we essentially now have to allow the fire to happen and then come in afterwards, ask the court to extinguish it, right? That's
after the damage is done.
After the damage is done. And so the minute that the Shelby County decision happened, multiple states ran to pass laws, right? And in North Carolina, as an example, the state legislature passed a law immediately after Shelby County came out, removed their same-day registration, limited their early voting, put in restrictive voting ID laws, and then it took another 3 years before the court finally decided that this was unlawful and essentially ordered it to be repealed. But the problem was that you'd already had elections, multiple elections under those restrictive voting laws, and people had their voting rights stripped from them, until we could finally find justice in the courts. And that takes time.
Yeah. And here we are again with another Supreme Court case about to be decided. This Moore versus Harper case, because as I understand, the Shelby County case was basically ended pre-clearance. So you had all of these different areas doing all this chicanery, like moving polling places, all kinds of stuff, specifically for certain groups of people to not have an easy time of voting or not to be able to vote at all. And now, where's this Moore versus Harper going to take us? As you said, this is this is doing away with the fire alarm. Is this taking the extinguisher away?
Oh, this is not just taking the extinguisher away. This is saying we're going to dismantle the fire department, right? This is, you've got a 5-alarm fire going on. The legislature decides that it wants to take away people's voting rights. And now the legislature in Moore v. Harper is asking the Supreme Court to say, hey, we don't want any supervision from the state courts anymore. They shouldn't be allowed to tell us what we can and cannot do when it comes to federal elections. And so they could gerrymander in congressional elections. They can pass all sorts of laws that would restrict voting when it comes to congressional elections or the election for a president. And they're basically saying state courts should not be the boss of them.
Wow.
So we are in a situation where,
Hold on. These are the states' rights people, right?
These are the states' rights people.
These are the people who keep preaching us about states' rights, saying, wait a second, we're going to let... is this an admission that they know that the U.S. Supreme Court is bought and paid for already?
I think this is essentially cherry-picking their venue. And it is interesting that at the state level, many state courts have put the brakes on these restrictive voting practices because they have seen through how self-serving and partisan those efforts are and how discriminatory they are against Black voters and other voters of color. And so they've actually put the brakes on them time and time again. And what's astounding is that the state legislatures know that perhaps the last permission organization or entity that's going to give them permission to do what they want to do is the U.S. Supreme Court. And so they are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to obliterate the checks and balances that have been built into our U.S. Constitution since the founding of this nation and say that state courts shouldn't be the boss of them. And frankly, they don't want anybody to be the boss of them. They should be able to pass laws without any review. And we all know what kind of road we're going to go down if we allow this kind of tyranny of power to happen with one branch of government.
Wow, scary, scary stuff. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Kathy Fang. She's the National Redistricting Director at Common Cause. CommonCause.org is their website. You can check out another website, moreharper.org. Going to explain exactly what the Moore versus Harper case is, and maybe have some actions to get involved in. This is one of these moments, though, Kathy, where I'm going. Everybody I talk to says, we want everybody to vote. Yet when we have politicians choosing who gets to vote, shouldn't that make us angry?
We should absolutely be angry, we should demand that change needs to happen. We need to use our ballot as we have it to not only hold those politicians accountable, but also to change the laws so that they open up access, they don't close and restrict the right to the ballot, because that's what our country was founded on. Whether you are somebody who came here with your family at the founding times, you were here before colonists came, or you are a new immigrant. The fundamental idea of America that we hold up as a beacon to the world is that we are a democracy that values the rights of people, we the people, of the people, by the people. And the idea that somehow we would hand over all of our powers to be able to elect and choose our form of government to a group of elite electeds, right, to cement their power to never be challenged by the people is un-American.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing, because you're telling me there's a group of folks who are wanting to hold people from voting, erecting all of these barriers, purging people, passing restrictive voter ID laws, especially for those kids. But you got the other side who are saying, it's too loose. It's too loose, Kathy. We've got, 15 gazillion illegals coming in here and they're voting and there's all this fraud. And it seems like they're kind of trying to muddy the waters on the messaging front. So again, how do we divide the reality from the myth? How do we find out what's really going on when there's so much BS being thrown at us?
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of misinformation that's going out there about somehow the specter of fraudulent voting. And what we've found time and time again from independent studies that are conducted by universities, researchers, even bipartisan Republican and Democratic, electeds who go out there to look for where there might possibly be fraud. They're finding 0 cases. And the only instances that you find are usually political operatives, unfortunately, by Republicans, right? Because one of the most prominent examples is in North Carolina, where a Republican operative went around collecting people's ballots from people's mailboxes and then writing the answers in on their behalf. It is cynical political operatives who are committing fraud, not everyday voters. And the crazy thing is that this is an example of politicians cutting off their nose to spite their face, because it will come back and bite them.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that voters will not accept it. And when they see through the lies and realize that their power is about to be taken away, people will turn out to vote. People will demand their rights. And we will hold these politicians accountable.
No, you're so right on this. And it's interesting to watch, Donald Trump and the guy who ran for governor here in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, now backtrack on mail-in balloting. Now they seem to be, we should be in favor of it now. And look, I want everybody to be able to vote. I want the mass of the people, because the only way this experiment works, this wonderful experiment of the United States works, is if the governed, all of us, have a voice, and that voice is heard at the ballot box. Once you start fiddling with this, once you start putting restrictions on who can do what, where, why, and how, we got problems. And it's borne out in the rhetoric that we see every day. I can't tell you how many people tell me, we shouldn't let those kids vote. No, we need to raise the voting age back to 21. I'm going, that's insanity. But again, it's the messaging that we hear.
I think that what we need to remember is that there are some people who will stoke division and fear in order to be able to hold on to power. But what I'm reminded of is that my daughter, who is 16 years old, and her friends are very attuned to the world around them, the politics, and they take a very non-cynical view. They want to make sure that their generation has a world that they can live in, a ballot that's going to be meaningful, things that they are going to care about and be able to live in a healthy and caring society. And that means for my generation, I need to fight to protect their right to vote, because the government that we leave behind for them needs to serve them, be representative, and be accountable. And if we start pulling back on this and that just to gain some kind of momentary partisan advantage, all we're doing is leaving a fundamentally broken system that will go down the path of tyranny for our next generation. And I'm not afraid of, a bad president or two. What I'm afraid of is that we don't have an American democracy anymore.
No, you're so spot on. But it's in the rhetoric, though, Kathy. I mean, the reality is you've got these original intenters who want to go back to what they believe the original intent was, which just white landowning males over 21 voting, and the rest of you sit down and shut up.
Yeah. The crazy thing is that when it comes to Morvey Harper, I don't always agree with the founding fathers, but on this one, they had it right. They were always afraid of putting power into one branch and one branch alone. They created a system of checks and balances between the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branch. Right. They also created checks and balances between state and national. And at every step of the way, they sort of said, we don't trust any one entity to hold all the power. We need to make sure that we distribute that and that each one is balancing the other. And in this case, Morvey Harper, we could go down the wrong road of allowing for one branch to be all powerful and absolute. And I think the biggest fear that I have is that if we go down that route, we will not be able to go back, because you will unleash the self-serving and reinforcing nature of power. And once that power is concentrated in a few people's hands, we will not see a country that we recognize anymore.
No, it's frightful what the 6 dictators in robes could possibly do. And we've got to fight back. So the question is what do people do? Is there anything we, the people, can do in this moment? Is there any pressure to bear? Is there any organization? Are there any, what can be done? Because I fear, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, I fear the outcome is already decided. It's like a lot of these cases that we hear. There's a case in front of the court on making unions pay for losses to companies during a strike. I know where that's going. Workers are going to get screwed again. Is this a case where you think voters are going to get screwed again? And how do we stop it?
Here's the thing. This American experiment has time and time again shown that when people don't feel discouraged, when they don't just sort of lay down, when we are vigilant and when we choose to do the smallest of things, which is exercising the vote, we can make great things happen, right? We've seen that in Pennsylvania when people came together, the turnout increased, and you can have your choice of electeds and you can have your choice of laws, right? You can affect change. In Pennsylvania, it was the state where we were able to challenge the way the lines were drawn, and the courts agreed that there was a partisan gerrymander and redrew the lines in a fair way. And we actually have seen those kind of wins in state after state. And I think that even though we might feel sometimes downtrodden and maybe even cynical about the possibility of change, I think when we turn out, we can see amazing things happen. And that is, as you said, Rick, Democrats, Republicans, independents alike. The key thing is that we don't take that power for granted and we give up and sort of say, it's the stars have already determined our fate and we can't possibly change it because, the politicals have already put the fix in. No, this government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we have shaped it in the past, and we've reshaped it when necessary. When we needed to fight in the Civil War and then create the 14th and 15th Amendments, we did. And then when we needed to come back and fix that with the Voting Rights Act, we did. And again, our country has been reforged into a more perfect union by people coming together and demanding change.
I'm ready to get in the streets and start mobilizing today. And I hope folks will. This is very important. And I hope people will check out the website, moreharper.org. We'll get links out on social media. I can take a look at this as the 10th anniversary of the Shelby County versus Holder arguments come upon us. And this Moore versus Harper case. But Kathy, I appreciate you taking some time explaining this. One of the best analogies I've heard on the fire extinguisher and the fire. I hope folks take that to the cooler tomorrow and start spreading the word. But Kathy Fang, I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Rick. You have a good evening.
You as well. I appreciate it. Again, make sure you check out the website, moreharper.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968, and striking sanitation workers staged a sit-in at the City Council meeting in Memphis, Tennessee. The striking workers were members of AFSCME Local 1733. They had been on strike for 10 days. Their demands included union recognition, a pay increase, a grievance procedure, and end to workplace discrimination. Also at issue was workplace safety. February 1st, 1968 was a rainy day. Two black sanitation workers, Ethel Cole and Robert Walker, sought shelter from the heavy rain in the only place city rules allowed them to be, in the back of their garbage truck with the trash. Tragedy struck, and both men were crushed to death due to faulty equipment. The strike started soon after. At the City Council sit-in, hours passed with neither side backing down. As the hours wore on, the union brought in sandwiches for their members. Finally, the City Council capitulated, but the mayor of Memphis still refused to recognize the union. The sanitation workers' struggle garnered the attention of civil rights leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King came to Memphis to support the striking workers. While on the trip, King was assassinated coming out of the Lorraine Motel. As the country mourned Dr. King's death, the strike wore on, lasting 65 days before the city settled under heavy pressure from Washington, D.C. Memphis officials met most of the strikers' demands. During the strike, the black sanitation workers carried a sign that read simply, "I am a man." Pickets with this simple, dignified, and powerful statement became one of the iconic images of the civil rights movement. The slogan is still used today at civil rights and labor marches. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. So remember, Republicans are the party of pro-life. At least that's what they tell us. Remember? They're all about the pro-life. It's they care about the babies. They love the children. They love the children. Love themselves some children. Except for, I guess, this representative from Alaska. Representative David Eastman is his name. You may know he was one of the Capitol rioters, also an oath keeper. So, yeah, interesting character. Evidently, he made some bizarre kind of idiotic. I don't actually know which word would fit here. Let me lay the scene. So they were having a hearing, a committee hearing they were discussing a presentation on preventing child abuse and how to save money in the long run. Because there's problems with this. There's a presentation by this Alaska Children's Trust Fund. They're a nonprofit group who, were saying, look, this is our plan and all this. Well, Representative Eastman thought it was the right time to, I'm just going to read what he said. Quote, in this case where child abuse is fatal, obviously it's not good for the child, but it's actually a benefit to society because there aren't needs for government services and whatnot throughout the child's life. That's the right response. I went with what the, but again, this is love the babies. He didn't back down, doubled down saying talking dollars. Now you've got a $1.5 million price tag for victims of fatal child abuse. It gets argued periodically that it's actually a cost savings because that child is not going to need any government services that might otherwise be entitled to receive and need based on growing up in this type of environment. So poor kids are okay to be murdered by child abuse, by their parents or by others. But why? Oh yeah, so we won't have to give them food stamps or an education or you fill in the blank. Now remember, this is a guy who's against abortion, was endorsed by the Alaska Right to Life people. The people who said every life matters. This is this folks. Again, against abortion, but I guess in favor of killing a child after it's born. Now I used to say, they cared about the fetus. They cared about the fetus, inside. As soon as it popped out, they didn't care. This is going, don't care. So Representative David Eastman the good Republican from Alaska. Blank you. I mean, and I guess there's something telling in this for me. Because I've said a million times, these people don't give a tinker's damn about kids. What they care about is controlling women and their bodies, and cheap labor. Cheap labor. And if we kill a couple along the way, saves us some money anyway. They're going to be lazy. Wow. Want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.